Aibowan. Today we are at the Pagota Meditation Center in Nugegoda with Venerable Olande Ananda Thera. It's great to see you, sir.
Sukhi Hotu.
Venerable sir, it's a great pleasure to be in your beautiful temple. It's very nice. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Can I ask you, sir? Thank you. Can I ask you, sir, how did you discover Buddhism? You were born in the West, in Holland, and so can you tell us a little bit about your journey in discovering Buddhism, sir?
Well, to start with, I was born in a free thinkers family. We did not follow any particular religion.
Yes.
You could say we were humanists and free thinkers. So that left me free to search for something. When I felt the need for happiness, because I became more and more unhappy with myself, with my studies of economics and sociology, and with the world and the politics and the situation in the world, I saw it going down, 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 and I felt myself sort of helpless what to do. I thought of joining the UNDP, United Nations Development Program. But they already had enough Dutch people, the quota was full. So then what to do? I wanted to help the world, to do something for the world, to make it a better place.
Yes.
And when it was not possible through the UNDP, I thought, well, first of all, I should do something about myself to find happiness and then maybe give it to others. So before Buddhism, I heard about transcendental meditation, TM, which was taught by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi to the Beatles in those days, 1968, 69. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi came to Europe, and we had a lecture at our University of Amsterdam about this type of meditation, and I joined that meditation, or I learned the technique by getting initiated into that technique. My mother also got the teachings of that technique, and she started practicing at the same time as me, with different mantras. This was a repetition of a mantra to get your mind quiet and to find some peace and happiness within. 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and that was it. But that teaching is based more or less on the Hindu teachings. And then what happened is that while I was living in Amsterdam on a houseboat, a friend of mine, an American, gave me a book to read, which was called The Autobiography of a Yogi. That was written by Paramahansa Yogananda. It's a world-famous book. And it dealt with another kind of meditation called Kriya Yoga. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. I must now go to India to see what a developing country is like, because I was studying economic sociology of developing countries, and also to see what that kind of meditation is about. So at the end of 1972, while I was in my 6th year of studies at the university, I decided to not finish the MA program completely, but to go to India and find out more about spirituality and the practice of a developing country. And searching for this, I actually found the ashram. Now what happened is, before finding the ashram in India, one Indian person was traveling in Europe, and he got a lift from another couple of friends of mine, Americans who lived in Amsterdam. They were visiting Denmark, and they found this Indian young man standing by the roadside hitchhiking. And they gave him a lift all the way to Amsterdam. They said, would you like to see our friend who lives in a houseboat? Yes, yes. So he saw, when he walked in, he saw that book, Autobiography of a Yogi. Then he asked me, are you planning to go to India? I said, yes, in December.
So you said you lived in a houseboat, is
I
that
lived
right?
in a houseboat, yes.
In
Very
Amsterdam.
interesting. Surrounded by VOC 17th century houses, in the center of Amsterdam, that were built on the exploitation of the colonial power, Holland, of Sri Lanka and Indonesia. The money went into the big houses in there. Anyway, so in that houseboat, which was a simple way of living actually, but very beautiful in the center of Amsterdam, this Indian fellow came with this American young couple who were vegetarians and practicing yoga, and whom I had known before. And he asked me if I'm going to India. I said yes. In December I'm planning to go. So he said, well, in that case, come directly to us. We live around the corner from the author of this book, that autobiography of a yogi. So I spent only a couple of days in Delhi on my way to this place. It's in Ranchi, Bihar. Now, by chance, the international president of that organization of Yogananda, called the Yoga Satsanga, or the Self-Realization Fellowship, Daya Mata, she happened to be there. And she saw me. At that time I was actually dressed very differently, with a flowery shirt and a beard and a bit long hair. And she asked me, where are you from? And I said, from Amsterdam. Oh, how interesting. Second day she came around and she said, where are you from? I said, from Amsterdam. Oh, how interesting, she said. So I said, let me ask her if I can stay here. She said, sorry, but we have a center in Amsterdam and this is only for Indians, so you can't stay here. Then I started, actually, after some time, traveling around India, going up and down the breadth of India, from the Himalayas to Kanyakumari, and from the west to the east and all around, visiting ashrams, mainly Hindu ashrams, but also some Buddhist places. This Brahmin family of that boy who came hitchhiking to Amsterdam, with whom I was staying for 2 or 3 months at the beginning, they were all educated, they were well-to-do, they had a printing press themselves and 2 bookshops. They said, it seems to us that Buddhism is more suitable for you than our Hinduism, even though they were Hindus, Brahmins, you see, but they felt that Buddhism was more suitable for me. So they gave me even a small Buddha statue, and they said, you can go to Gaya, one of our relations is living there, you can visit Buddha Gaya. One of our relations, a doctor, the father of one of the sister-in-laws, he was the district medical officer in Varanasi, and you can visit Saranath. And so, like that, I got introduced to Buddhism a little bit. And also, I visited places like, Ellora and Ajanta, and also, around Bodh Gaya. And but I was not really into Buddhism at that time. I was practicing this, but I got, because at the end of my first visit, actually after being rejected, I went back to say goodbye to these people, the Brahmins, and I was going back to Holland. And just then I met a person who said, what's the purpose of your visit to India? So I said, well, if you really want to know, I came to find a disciple of Yogananda, but I couldn't find. He said, I know one, but he's separate from that main ashram, and I'll take you there. He's a doctor and a Swami. So he immediately, after 2 or 3 days, he initiated me into that Kriya Yoga technique, which is also meditation with breathing, deep breathing, pranayama, and chanting of the Om mantra and things like that, concentration on the third eye, and a kind of Kundalini yoga. So with that technique I went back to Holland, and then I started practicing that, and this Swami wrote a letter, why don't you come back and you can become a Swami here. So with that idea I came back to India after a year of working to earn some money and deciding whether I want to finish my studies or not, which I decided not to. And then I went back to India with the idea of actually becoming a Hindu Swami. So after 1 month in India with that Swami, my visa ran out and I needed to go for a new visa, which is described in my autobiography. The train stopped and it was on strike, and I had to leave India and went by train to the border with Nepal, and I met a Sri Lankan Buddhist monk sitting in the same train, which stopped for hours and hours on him. And we became friends, and then we traveled together. And then he said, well, next time when your visa expires, you don't need to necessarily come to Nepal. You could also try to come to Sri Lanka. And he gave me some addresses like Vajirarama at Bambalapitiya, then the Kanduboda Meditation Center, and another temple in Kotte, another one in Pitipane, like that. So with that list of addresses, I came to Sri Lanka with the idea of getting a new visa and go back to India. But as things happened, that is now by this time it was 1st of May 1975, and I had not become a Swami there in India yet. I was wearing white by that time. My flowery shirt was gone. And then I wanted to stop first in Anuradhapura, not go to Colombo immediately. So while I was in Anuradhapura, by train I came from Talemanar. Those days there was a ferry service between Rameshwaram and Talemanar, so I came by boat, which was discontinued after the riots of 1983. And that time I came by boat and then by train to Anuradhapura, and I went to the Dutugamunu Visramasala, Pilgrim's Rest. While I was about to register there, one gentleman who was selling rice lunch parcels to that place, he said, "Why do you want to spend your money here? You can stay with us for free. Come to our house." So I went with him, and I stayed there, not only a couple of days, I stayed for a week. And in that house was the curator of the folk museum of Anuradhapura, staying there as a boarder. And he asked if I was interested in Buddhism. So I said, yes, but I'm hoping to go to India. He said, well, my mother lives opposite a temple where the chief monk knows English, he's very good. And if you go and meet my mother, I'll give you a letter of introduction. Then, she will take you to the temple. So when I arrived in Colombo railway station, I looked around for somebody who could speak English. I didn't know a word of Sinhala at that time. And most of the buses also were not in English that time, all Sinhala. So I asked somebody, can you tell me or take me to the bus to Pagoda? He says, Pagoda, what is that? So he looked at the address, he said, Pagoda, okay, Pagoda. Here's the bus. Anything else? So I said, thank you very much. So I've met this lady, the mother of this curator, and she took me to the temple after giving me a lunch, keeping my luggage in the house, just here at Pagoda Road, opposite the temple. And then she took me to the temple, and I met the chief monk, Venerable Dawal Dena Jnanisara, by the way. And he said, bring your luggage, you can stay here. I said, well, I can sleep on the floor, I have a mat, and I want to go to meditate at Kandubode. He said, you can do that anytime, but why don't you just come here, and then you can stay here as long as I breathe, he said, at that time. So that's how I came to stay at Pagoda.
Yes. And you found your teacher here.
I found a teacher.
Yes.
Strangely enough, on the same day in the evening, a young man comes to invite the teacher and some monks for chanting Pirit in a hospital, because his father was in hospital after a heart attack. And then he looks at me and says, do you remember this morning who put you onto the bus? That same young man.
Same young man.
To see who he was, I didn't know at that time, but he was, and he is, Hemukumar Naniakara. And his mother happened to be the Sabhapatini of the Kanta Samiti of that particular temple, the president of the women's committee. So I thought, wow, this is not a simple coincidence.
Yes.
This must have been like sort of preordained, or like I was guided here or whatever. And I felt I don't need to go anywhere else.
Yes.
No. Except that I did want to go to Kandubode for meditation.
Yes.
Because this was not a meditation center, this was a temple. All the monks were studying, and then later on they were going to teach in Pirivenas and schools, but not really spiritual meditation.
Yes. So you talk very highly of your teacher. So please tell us about your relationship with your guru, Hamdro, and what qualities did he have?
I thought, even though he was not a meditation master, he had qualities. I thought he was a living example of metta, maitri, loving kindness.
Yes.
And he was also very mindful, although he didn't sit for meditation, but he did things very mindfully, when he was writing something, his full attention was on the writing. When he was reading something, his full attention was there. But also, when somebody would come to see him, unexpectedly, he immediately put down what he was working with, and he was fully attentive to that.
I see.
So that was very good quality. But still, I felt I want to study or practice meditation, and since I had this address of Kandabode, I went there soon after, and my teacher said, Venerable Davalenanyani sort of said, you can leave your luggage here, just take something to there and then come whenever you. So for 3 weeks I went for the first time, silent meditation, only some little talk with the teacher, who was Katukelle Sivali Hamdru those days, and Sumatipala Hamdru, you know, Kahatapiti Sumatipala, the founder of Kanduboda, was there, but his English was no good. He didn't speak English. So Sivali Hamdru was the English-speaking teacher, and if necessary, he would translate for Venerable Sumatipala. And so in those 3 weeks I had very good experiences, but I still was not sure whether I wanted to stay in Sri Lanka all the time or go back to India and become a Hindu Swami. But so I went back to Pagoda, and then I went again to Kandaboda, and that time I stayed again for 3 weeks in silent meditation with guidance from the teacher, and he had special qualities like whenever I had a feeling I want to see the teacher, within a minute somebody would knock on the door and said, "Teacher wants to see you." You know, and he knew what I wanted to ask. Also, he knew immediately what about I was thinking. So that made me feel, yes, he knows quite a lot. Not knowledge-wise, you know, but he is aware, and he's got some wisdom. And then in my own meditation, I had a point where I had an experience which made me think, yes, this is it. I was completely in the present, and I felt, instead of this bhakti approach of Hinduism, which is like you do this practice now, you chant, you meditate, and you do mantras, and then in the future you unite with God or whatever it may be. Instead of that, it is in the here and now, and you look at things and you solve the problem here and now, from moment to moment. So that made me think, yes, this is it for me. And then I also had to decide to become a Buddhist monk or leave the country, otherwise I wouldn't have kept my visa extension. So that came next. So,
Yes. So, sir, when you finally discovered inner Buddhism, you know, the here and now, in that journey, starting from Holland to discovering this, your experience with your parents, your teachers, what have you to say, to share with our viewers? I'm sure there are a lot of parents, a lot of teachers who are watching. What advice do you have for teachers and parents in helping people find the light, you know, finding inner happiness, the here and now?
Well, I think there's been a lot of talking about nirvana, and talking about peace and happiness, and bana, 24 hours a day on 3-4 TV stations and radio. But whether that leads to inner peace and happiness is yet another question. One would really have to practice it oneself to find out what it is. You can't sort of talk somebody into it. You can take a horse to the water, but you cannot force it to drink. That is the English expression. Which means, you know, you can't really force anybody to meditate and find out for themselves, but maybe teachers, and also spiritual teachers, monks in this case. You know, the problem is that a lot of the, sorry to say, but Buddhist monks in Sri Lanka, because they get ordained at a very young age, sometimes in the local village temple, under a monk who has no meditation experience, they only learn gathas, and then they go to the Pirivena without meditating, and then they are taught to do, let's say, pujas, and then pansukula and bana, but not meditation. So now that is the main problem, I suppose, in Sri Lanka, that there's not much of spiritual dimension,
Yes.
although it is coming.
Yes.
It's coming back.
Yes. Yes.
There must have been some time that it was there.
Yes.
Then it was lost, I think.
Yes.
About 50 years ago, or even 100 years ago, people thought that meditation is only for the monks living in the forest.
Exactly.
It's not for the lay people. But nowadays, especially since Kandaboda was founded in 1956 or 54 maybe, and the Buddhist monks from Burma actually helped to popularize meditation. They said it's also possible for lay people. And like S.N. Goenka and his teacher Uba Khin gave the example that lay people also can meditate, and they can even become very good meditation teachers. In Kandy, you know, this area, Nilambe with Godwin Samarratne, world famous, became a meditation master. He was a librarian of the Dia Serenayake library in Kandy, but then he became interested in spirituality himself. J. Krishnamurti's teachings also, which I also found very much helpful in my search for truth, which was very different kind of approach, you know, not a traditional kind of approach, but more, you could say almost like a radical approach, free from rituals, free from dogma, free from belief.
So the real practice and the essence of Buddhism.
Yeah, in the sense of being aware from moment to moment.
Yes. So when I was working as a principal in an international school, we started every period after meditating for 1 minute.
Yes.
And so that would have been 8 minutes of meditation during the school periods. So I found that the younger the children were very interested in it. So do you think this is a good way of taking things forward? At the time it was very popular. So
I would say maybe 1.5 minutes.
a little bit more. Yes.
Because in 1 minute, how far can you go?
Yes.
But if it is too long, then they may become restless also. So you have to find the right balance between too long and too short, just the right timing. But between 1 and 2 minutes would be good. And then actually when their minds are more calm and quiet, they can also listen better to what the teacher has to say, or read more and remember more from what they are actually supposed to read. So I think that's a very good idea, actually.
Very good, sir. And again, when we look at teachers, parents, and your parents seem to have been very accommodative when I read your book. And what is your advice for parents and teachers in dealing with children, with today's issues of social media and all the challenges that children have? It's a very competitive, globalized world.
Yes.
So
when I was young, of course, that was not the case.
Yes.
Even when I had to ask my parents for permission to become a monk, there was no internet. We didn't have telephone even in the temple, and to make an international call was almost impossible. So I had to write aerogram to get my parents, permission to get ordained. Otherwise, in Buddhist tradition, they don't ordain you. So what my father wrote back was, well, if nobody forces you, and if you think this makes you happy, if it is you who has decided yourself, and you think this makes you happy, then you can have our blessings. We can always ask questions later, can't we? You see? So they were very open-minded, partly because they didn't belong to any particular religion. They were not fanatic about anything, and they only thought about my welfare. But they were also a little bit hesitant and a little bit afraid of whether I would be sleeping on spikes or on concrete or something like that. Did I have a bed, or did I get enough to eat, and things like that. So my teacher said, why don't you invite them to come and see, My father was a businessman. He didn't have time at the time of my ordination, but 3 months later they came. 2 days after their arrival, there was a dana ceremony at Pagoda, somebody's house, and when they saw what the monks get to eat,
they were happy.
they lost their fear about me losing. Now you can see
Yes.
those days I was very thin.
Yes.
But so they were very happy, and they thought, oh yes, he's being looked after very well. We don't have to worry about him. And we took them all around Sri Lanka, and they saw a lot of Buddhist places. So,
Yes.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think an open mind is one thing,
Yes.
but also certain standards may be also necessary, sometimes a little bit of being strict towards the children. There was a period in the 1960s, they called Spock, Dr. Spock, who wrote a book about how to bring up children without any rules, no rules at all. They just, can do whatever they like. And that generation became sort of boundless. They didn't know what to do, and they went off the track. So these same grown-up people, when they got children, they became more strict with their children, and sometimes you hear that if parents are strict at the moment, maybe the children don't like it, but later on they appreciate it, that they've been given some boundaries also.
Yes.
Now with the social media, when you give this example, almost all the children have either an iPhone, or a tablet or something like that, an internet, and they are mostly spending their time on that more than the studies even. And now that is going a bit too far. They are sometimes addicted actually to the social media. It's very easy to get addicted to that. It's so interesting, but also they spend a lot of time on games, getting addicted to the games, which is absolutely not good for them. Even for their head and for their back, the neck, sitting like that all the time, and also for the eyes, being fixed, about 1 foot, is very bad for health, for the cervical, spine cord, and also for the eyes. It's no good to be fixed all the time. And then for the mind also, to just be playing these games. There are a lot of interesting things in the internet. One can actually learn quite a lot. You don't have to by heart everything like in the old days. If you know how to find knowledge in the internet, just use it for that. But if it becomes like what is happening, even the parents between them, one will be in the kitchen, the woman maybe, and the husband is in the other room or in the office. They send each other emails, or messages.
Yes.
And everybody looks at the messages rather than just talk to each other openly.
Yes.
So that has become a kind of a disease almost.
It's a difficult situation, isn't it,
It's
sir?
very difficult, yeah. So what they call the means of communication have actually led to the breakdown of communication between people.
Yes.
There was a very funny, cartoon in the papers when in this recently there were these riots in Digene, and the government decided to shut down the internet.
Yes.
And then you see a couple sitting opposite a doctor, actually he's a counselor, and the woman says, well, the problems really started when we didn't have the internet and we had to talk to each other. They didn't know how to talk to each other.
Exactly,
even,
exactly. So looking at this now traditionally we teach our children to listen to parents. Now the thing is, when you look at the previous generation, if you look at the elders' approach to life, to honesty, to family values, staying away from what's bad for you, and being honest and using kind, caring words. If the parents don't have these qualities and insist on children having these qualities, how does one go about things, and at what point now then children will find it very difficult to follow their parents and respect.
Yes.
So this vicious cycle of not showing by example and then telling children what to do. So it's very clear what parents should do, but if you're a child, you can't choose your parents, and you've got your parents, and if the parents aren't setting a good example, should the children listen to parents, and at what point should children take the right decisions, and how do you decide on that?
That's a complicated question, and I don't know if it's possible to generalize for everybody.
Exactly.
It's probably case by case, but of course.
Now, in your case, sorry, you came out and your parents accepted that, and they were only worried about your well-being.
Yeah.
So, but the average child in Sri Lanka or abroad, when they decide to take a step forward in life, parents may hold them back. Again, it depends on the background.
Yeah, it
so
depends on
what
what
are your
kind
comments,
of step forward. Now, for instance, freedom, children may want more freedom. For instance, freedom to go out in the night, especially the Colombo young people, those who are going to international schools, people with money. The children usually get a big pocket money. They can go, or maybe they have a credit card or something from the parents, and they can go out and they come back late in the night, and they may be doing all kinds of things which the parents did not used to do. But on the other hand, the parents also have facilitated that and given them that freedom to, then if they say you should not do that, well, I mean, yes, there are certain standards which they must be keeping, but as you said, sometimes the parents don't even have those qualities, and if they don't, now one problem is in the cities, not so much in the villages, but in the cities, in order to live that life that people want to live, the standard of living, you need both parents to work hard. From morning till evening, they're out of the house. The children come home from school and nobody is there. Maybe the maid or somebody is there, but not the parents. So they don't have much chance to interact with the parents either. So it's partly the parents to blame. Now some mothers decide it's more important to stay home, not to earn that much money, but maybe be more satisfied with what you have, and then to be there for the children.
Yes.
Which is probably a good idea.
Which is better, isn't it, sir?
Yes.
And in that light, sir, yes, now the world is globalized, we are working hard. Now in Sri Lanka, a lot of buildings are coming up. The number of cars seems to be doubling if you just watch what's happening on the roads. So is this development, and are we heading the right way? Because you visited more than 40 countries, and you've seen all these countries from Holland to Burma. So what advice do you have for us? Are we heading the right way? What is sustainable development? Is it possible for us?
Well, one thing that I thought of is the concrete Buddhism nowadays. Concrete Buddhism means more and more buildings in the temples.
Yes.
Even here, unfortunately, a new building is coming up, which I didn't want. Some trees had to be cut for that. I didn't want that, but still, it's happening. And just by having more buildings in the temple, there's not necessarily spiritual or even social or progress. And in the country as a whole, when you cut down the trees and put up the parking lots, as there was a song in the 1970s, let's cut down the trees and put up a parking lot. More and more, concrete, more and more asphalt, tar, and very high-rise buildings which take away the view also, and the air and the wind, sometimes the light even of the sun. Well, if you walk around New York City, I've been there several times, it sort of look like this all the time, to see their buildings. Whether that is progress or not, it is really a question you have to sometimes think of. Now, that is the interesting part. what Bhutan has done, you know. Bhutan is not a big developed country. It's a small country, very few people actually living there, and they have come up with the concept of gross national happiness. Now that is a kind of measurement which is difficult to make, what consists of gross national happiness, but generally speaking they are more concerned with having great nature, 70% of the country covered by trees. When you get married there, you get a certain allotment of wood, from this tree this much, from that tree this much, and then but you have to plant so many trees in return, more than what you cut or what people cut for you and what you buy or whatever. So you are actually helping to maintain or even develop the level of the forests while you use wood. And apparently the people there are some of the happiest people in the world. They may not have so many TVs per person or so much of dollars per person like in some countries. Yeah, what is actually sustainable growth? Now in the earlier days there was like unbridled capitalism. First industrial revolution, then more and more capitalism. The experiments with socialism and communism didn't work in many places. Even in China now it is more or less like capitalism, but state capitalism. And they're unbridled almost, you know, not thinking of the environment. And now the environment has been so much polluted, and we're using so much of plastics. Now finally the Marriott Hotel and the Starbucks and also some other hotel chains have decided to stop using plastic straws, because 1 billion straws are being consumed per day, I think, for just the one chain. And it ends up in the stomachs of the fish and, you know, the animals, and you find dead animals around the world, and the whole sea is now polluted with plastics. So one never thought about that when one said, oh yes, plastic, you know, is very good. So it has to become necessary to think globally, act locally, like Mahatma Gandhi said, and learn to live happily with what one has, not always, you know, in search of more and not getting any satisfaction from that. Even children, when they are being spoiled by the parents, they get so much of play goods, you know, so many toys, mostly made of plastic, and then after 1 or 2 months all the toys are in the corner and they don't play with them anymore.
Since we are running out of time, sir, can I ask 2 questions in one go, sir? Which is, what is your most memorable memory in terms of good karma? What is the most beautiful deed you did? And can you share that with us? And then the next question is, why is this book called Monks and Monkeys?
Yes, well, I mean, the most memorable merit, I would say, is the fact that my parents wanted to become Buddhists. They once expressed the wish, and I said, actually, you are already Buddhists.
In practice.
In practice. Why should you want to become Buddhists? And then, so that went by, and then a couple of years later, actually 17 years after my ordination, so that would have been 1992, exactly on that day they said, let us keep that day free, and then they had they said, let us then have a small ceremony. So we had I chanted for them, we meditated together, I gave them Buddhist names, Hansa and Maya. My father's name was Hans, mother's name was Marie, so close to that.
That's wonderful.
And then Pirit Nul, we had this Puskolokot all in Holland, and kind of Chaitya. So that was, according to Buddhism and Buddhist people and traditional Buddhists, it is one of the greatest merits to see that your parents become Buddhists. I never forced them, I didn't ask them, I didn't tell them, they asked for it. Because they've been 5 times to Sri Lanka also, every 2 years they used to come, and they took an interest in it. And
Sadhu,
then,
sadhu.
yes, the last question was what to share.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm just speechless because you found your inner happiness here and now. And then by example, you set the example and your parents followed you. So that's a great lesson for all of us, I think. Rather than trying to correct the others, correct ourselves and...
Yeah, then it happens.
Exactly. Sir, why is this book called Monks and Monkeys?
Monks and
It's a
Monkeys,
beautiful
yes.
book.
It's a book, yeah, it's actually my autobiography.
Yes, sir.
And Monks and Monkeys is the title because, well, I lived in a forest hermitage in an Aranya for 12 years near Gaul. And also I was in upcountry in a place where from time to time monkeys came. Even here,
Yes.
you got sometimes monkeys, now with the trees cut there and activities going on, maybe less. But I sort of liked the monkeys. They're quite innocent, I thought. And therefore I thought, yes, I have never had bad experiences with monkeys. But I've had some bad experience with monks, unfortunately. But I won't go into that.
Understand, yes.
But of course there are 25,000 monks in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Majority are very good.
Yes.
But some of them I have had bad experiences. But anyway, I've dealt with monks and with monkeys and maybe with people also around the country and internationally. But still, it just came up to me in my mind as a funny title. It's difficult to translate now. The Sri Lankan Sinhala translation of this book is also coming out, but I don't know how to translate that because it does rhyme here.
I'm sure you'll get a lot of help with that.
Probably, yes. Actually, Mr. D.C. Ramatunga has helped with the translation. So it has a lot of... this is one picture of me sitting over here and all that kind of thing. Here in Indonesia, all kind of places around the world.
A lot of pictures and
lot of
very
pictures
informative
and some text which is easy to read. Also Ajanta, Ellora, the Buddhist places in India.
And finally, sir,
it is available, by the way, in Vijayatiyapas and also at the Buddhist Cultural Center at Tunmulja.
And thank you for the copy, sir.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And also, sir, how can people listen to your sermons and how can they join your meditation programs? Would you like to summarize within a few minutes?
Okay. Well, one regular activity that I do is on Monday evenings from 5:30 to 7:30. I have a program at the Buddhist Cultural Center at Tunmula Junction. I give meditation, guided meditation, sitting, walking and standing, and then we have meditation here on the Poya days at Pagula Meditation Center. The whole morning I conduct meditation. The afternoon we have Sinhala Dhammasakaccha, and every third Saturday at 4:30 p.m. at Bambalapitiya Mettaramaya I conduct a meditation class. And beyond that, which is maybe easier to avoid the traffic jams, you can go to olandeananda.org and listen to my talks and guided meditations, or look at youtube.com/olandeananda and have oodles of Googles.
Thank you, sir. You are a field of merit and happiness. I feel your metta. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much, sir.
Pinsit Didula.
Sadhu, sadhu.